You know, Dan Brown, before you go talking about the Electoral College, maybe you should tell people why there is an Electoral College in the first place. We have to go back to the early days of colonialism before we can really understand why there was an Electoral College in the first place. Then we can understand why there's still one today. Okay? Now, let's start this way. There are currently 50 states in the United States. But of course, back at that time, there were only 13. Now, have you ever seen the size of the state of New York? Have you ever seen the size of the state of Rhode Island? Now, if they were going to vote for president between those two particular states, no others, who do you think is going to win? Well, obviously, because of the population of New York and the population of Rhode Island, well, doesn't take a genius to figure this one out. There's more people in New York than there is in Rhode Island, so New York would always get the winner of the presidency because they're a bigger state. That's why we can't have a direct vote. There's more than one reason why we can't have a direct vote. That's one of them. Because, believe it or not, the bigger states would always choose our president because there's more people in the bigger states than there are in the smaller ones. That's a problem. That's number one. Back then, the colonials of that time were suspicious of a central national government. They just were. Every state was suspicious of this new federal government, as people of today should still be. Now, back in the colonial days, transportation was a joke. How were they supposed to campaign riding horses from state to state? Do you realize how long it would have taken a campaign back then to have campaigned in every single one of those 13 states? I mean, my gosh, you're talking from Maine all the way down to North and South Carolina, so on and so forth. It would have taken a long time. It probably would have taken several years to have done that kind of campaigning. Talking horse and buggy here. You're not talking about modern trains, planes, automobiles that we have today. Shoot, a whole campaign could probably take about 2 to 3 months in this day and age, but back then, yeah, right. And how about communication? Yeah. You had your books and you had your newspapers. Do you realize how long it takes to transport newspapers by horse and buggy, or possibly by ship? If you get it on a ship, the ship has to sail then down to each port and deliver all the flyers. News didn't travel as fast back then as it does today. Shoot, today you turn on your TV set and boom, there you go, you got your news. Back then, yeah, right. Now back then, the colonial people thought that political parties were very evil. Well, just look at the current Democrats and the Republicans. They're not exactly the saints of the Bible, you know. I didn't say they were totally evil. I'm just saying that they aren't exactly Sir Saints. Come on, just take a look at what Bill Clinton did in the White House. That ought to tell you everything. Bill Clinton was no saint, I can tell you that. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who say the same thing about George Bush. George Bush was no saint either. Well, you know, fine. But you're getting the idea. There is no political party that strictly adheres to the 10 Commandments of the Bible. Alright? Now, back then, the colonial people believed that people shouldn't even campaign for office. That's interesting. How were they going to get elected if they never campaigned? How were they going to get elected if they didn't do any mudslinging? That was an interesting thought. Now, were other ideas tossed around when it came to electing a president? Back then, yes. First, they thought about having Congress vote in the president. Yeah, okay, so now the legislative branch of the federal government is now pretty much controlling the executive branch. Not a good idea. How about the state legislatures? They'll vote the president in, right? Yeah, I don't think that'd be a good idea. because then you'd have the great big state legislatures pretty much voting in your presidents. Again, big to small, not a good idea. And obviously a direct vote, same type of situation. Now you've got a big state like New York voting in your president, and Rhode Island didn't have a chance. Not a good idea. So, what they wanted to do was they wanted to take a few people out of each state, have them actually meet the candidates, actually have them review the candidates' records. These would be well-informed people of each state. And the number of people that would be picking for each state would be based on how many senators a state had, which would be 2. Because remember, each state has 2 senators, so there'd be 2 in the Electoral College. And then, however many there'd be in the House of Representatives, which some states have like 15 in the House of Representatives, some states have more, some states have less. You get the picture. Still not completely fair, but a lot more fair than any other plan. So, there you go. So, that's why they have an electoral college. Now you say, well, we got a better transportation system today. We have a better communication system today. We have people that are better well informed about candidates. You're absolutely right. But you still got one little problem. Let me tell you something. Illinois is not as big as New York. Okay? And you got, of course, Kansas and Nebraska. Now, Kansas and Nebraska are bigger states, but they don't have as many people as, say, like New York. Shoot, New York City alone has 4 million people. Now, you got to consider the entire state of Illinois has 11 million. You got 4 million in New York City alone. You got 11 million in the state of Illinois. Who's going to win an election that way? So you still got that problem. And of course you got all these political parties campaigning, they're mudslinging, that kind of thing. Yeah, and well, of course everybody's suspicious of the federal government nowadays. And I don't know, maybe there are still some people that still believe that people shouldn't even campaign for office. That'd be interesting to see people not campaigning for the President of the United States. But those are the basic reasons why we have an electoral college today. And of course, without understanding all of that, then you really can't understand why we still have one. And I think it's still a good idea. Because like I said, even with all the improvements in transportation and communication, you still got that little problem of New York has more people than Illinois, and Illinois probably has more people than Kansas or Nebraska or anything like that. And definitely Illinois has more people than Rhode Island right now. Just by the mere size of Illinois and the mere size of Rhode Island. So you kind of get the idea of the problem here. So, that is why we still have an electoral college, and I think it's still a good idea. And you're going to see the Electoral College in action in this election. I will tell you more in a future video, so stay tuned.